I'd like to begin this morning by focusing my comments on the news that we all woke up to, that Mr. Zuma was released from jail after spending less than 2 hours as a result of a brand new policy for which he was the first beneficiary, that was very, very clearly designed in a very cynical way to ensure that Mr. Zuma once again escapes accountability for his acts of omission and commission in South Africa. And this really does represent a new low in South Africa for the rule of law and respect for judicial processes. It has been played fast and loose with the criminal justice system in South Africa, and once again has shown that the ANC membership card in your pocket is your best defense against justice, the best defense against the rule of law, and the best defense against accountability. It was almost cringeworthy to watch the Minister of so-called Justice in the country fall over himself this morning to try and explain how this was a routine matter. But it was not a routine matter. It is a fundamental insult to every South African who upholds the rule of law and who expects the government to ensure that there is the concept of equality before the law that is respected and defended. Mr. Zuma was released under the false pretense of special remissions, and in order to provide the subterfuge and cover for this cynical manipulation of the justice system, the President was also required to release almost 10,000 criminals from inside the justice system and surrounds the correctional services system back onto the streets of South Africa, where no doubt, with the high recidivism rate in South Africa, will be perpetrating crimes against the people of South Africa before too long. The confluence of coincidences is frankly too stark to ignore, and it was very, very clearly designed to ensure that Mr. Zuma did not spend any further time in jail. It's not surprising that this result and the outcome was delayed repeatedly and notices were sent and then withdrawn, because this sort of sly and devious behavior requires a great deal of forethought and planning. The fact that this remission comes into effect today, the very day that Mr. Zuma was to go back to jail and to be processed, is a very, very clear indication of exactly what has occurred here in South Africa. And if this wasn't a new fundamental low in South Africa, it would almost be a comedy of epic proportions. But special mention has to be made of the President, because every time South Africa wants a President to stand up for the fundamental values of the rule of law, equality before the law, every time we expect the President to fall in line on the side of the South African people and to choose his responsibility and constitutional duty to the people of South Africa over the narrow partisan interests of the ANC, he disappoints. And once again, the President's spineless nature to stand up for what is right, his inability to protect the people over party, has been on full display here. It has also set a fundamentally terrible precedent for South Africa. What does this mean, and what example does this create for the hundreds of ANC comrades, including many here in the Free State, who have littered the pages of the Zondo Commission report, and for whom the Zondo Commission report expects charges to be brought? Does it now mean that if you have the ANC membership card, whether you're Ace Magashule or anybody else, that you just flash this, and it means that you are no longer accountable in the South African system? But there is a link here again, and a wonderful contrast this week that I think should not go without mention. And that is the absolute binary that you now have between the DA and the ANC. Because while the city of Cape Town and the province of the Western Cape, represented by Jordan Hill Lewis, the mayor of Cape Town, and the Premier of the Western Cape, represented by Alan Winde, have spent this last week fervently and firmly on the side of the rule of law and against thuggery and against violence and against the use of arbitrariness to be able to make decisions. The ANC has been on the other side, defending those who've perpetrated violence, walking and turning their back on the own laws that they themselves have passed in the National Assembly. And so the message must go very clearly from today out to the rest of South Africa, that in your province and in your country, you have a chance to end this nightmare that the ANC are visiting on our country. And that's by using the most powerful tool that any citizen has in a democracy, and that is their vote. You can burn tires, you can block roads, you can make as much noise as you like outside municipal offices, you can wave as many placards. This government is beyond listening. The only language they will now understand is one that is translated to them through the ballot box and through the vote of every South African. And that is why it is so fundamentally important that every South African, regardless of whether they're in Puddijahaba or whether they are in Pretoria, whether they are in Durban or Dullstroom, needs to make absolutely sure that they are correctly registered to vote, and they can do so by checking our website that we've set up, check.da.org.za. Because the power in the next 12 months will only lie with people who are registered to vote. South Africa needs every citizen on board now, because what this decision the ANC have taken today has shown that we have a government that is not interested anymore on governing for the people, but only interested in governing for the party and the ANC. And as long as that government remains in power, it will continue to do so. That's also why the pact negotiations that are taking place next week for the Moonshot Pact in Gauteng are going to be so fundamentally important. Because for the first time since the dawn of democracy in South Africa, the ANC's election next year is not a foregone conclusion. And that the combined opposition, putting aside egos and differences, can work together to not only liberate our country from the nightmare of the ANC, but also to liberate provinces like the Free State, the epicenter of state capture in South Africa. And people can only do so if they are registered to vote.